The horse stopped on its own. Its breath rose in white clouds against the gray Montana sky, and Elias Graves did not push it forward. He sat still in the saddle, hands resting on the worn leather horn, his body stiff from 3 long weeks of riding north. 3 weeks of leaving behind Dodge City. 3 weeks of trying to outrun a name that carried blood with it. Below him sat Sulphur Creek. It was not much of a town. From the ridge, it looked like a scar cut into the earth. A handful of crooked buildings leaning into the wind. Smoke drifting from mine shafts like the last breath of something dying. The sign back on the trail had called it a settlement. To Elias, it looked like the end of the world. Good, he thought. That was the point. He had come to Montana in the fall of 1885 because he wanted to disappear. He wanted a place where no one knew what badge he had worn. No one knew how much blood had soaked into Dodge City dust at his boots. He wanted a place where the name Graves meant nothing. He rode the last mile into town slowly. The road was frozen mud, rutted deep enough to snap a wagon axle. Half the buildings were boarded shut. The other half looked like they were waiting their turn. He passed the saloon without looking inside. The sound of billiard balls clicking and the smell of cheap beer drifted into the cold air. It felt too much like home. Instead, he went into the general store. A man with a face like old leather looked up from a ledger. His eyes were dull and careful. "Looking for something?" "A place," Elias said. His voice was rough from disuse. "Away from town." The man spat tobacco juice into a tin cup. "Got a claim up northwest. Shack on it. Owner left sudden. Either in a hurry or in a box. Hard to remember." "I'll take it." The man blinked. "You don't want to see it first?" "Just want the paper." Elias pulled a worn pouch from his saddlebag and paid in cash. Greenbacks. Gold coins. Enough to stop questions. The man counted it twice, then slid a deed across the counter. "Watch the roof," he muttered, "and the wolves." 2 miles outside town, on a rise of barren land, the shack waited. It was worse than he expected. The porch sagged. 3 panes of glass were broken. The wind slipped through gaps in the logs like a thief. The land around it was hard and lifeless. It was perfect. He spent the first week in silence. From sunrise to dark, he worked. He hauled pine from the timber line with a rusty saw and a hatchet he found in the lean-to. He repaired the porch. He sealed the logs with mud and straw. He replaced broken glass with oiled canvas to keep the wind out. At night, he slept on a straw tick on the floor, his coat for a blanket, his saddle for a pillow. Under that saddle rested his Colt revolver. He woke often, his hand already gripping the walnut handle, heart racing as if he had heard a gunshot. The wind outside would howl across the hills, and sometimes a wolf would answer it. The sound cut through the darkness like a knife. He told himself he liked the silence. He avoided town. He hunted for meat. Rabbits. A thin grouse. He took no joy in it. Killing was no longer something he felt. On the 10th day, he saw her. He was on the roof, nailing down fresh shingles, when he glanced toward the only other homestead in sight. A 1/4 mile east, separated by barbed wire and dead thistle. A woman stood behind the cabin hanging laundry. The wind whipped her skirts around her ankles. She wore a plain wool dress, no hat. Her dark brown hair was pulled tight, but loose strands snapped across her face. She fought the wind with steady movements, pinning sheets that snapped like flags, working alone. He stopped hammering. She must have felt his eyes on her. She turned, their gazes locked across the frozen field. He was a dark shape against the sky, hammer in hand. On the frontier, Strangers usually nodded, a small sign of shared hardship, a silent welcome. She did not wave. She stared at him for a long, hard second, her face pale, guarded, closed tight. Then she turned back to her laundry and drove another pin into the line with sharp force. Message received. Elias returned to his hammer. 3 days later, he ran out of nails. He rode into Sulphur Creek just past noon. The saloon was louder this time. Miners crowded the bar, their faces gray with dust and boredom. He gathered nails, salt, and kerosene without speaking. As he waited at the counter, the air shifted. "That's him," someone muttered. "The new one. Bought the Miller place." Another voice closer to his back. "Moved in next to the Widow Bell." Elias kept his eyes on the counter. "That one's trouble," a miner said. "Cold as winter." A low chuckle followed. "Heard she was warm enough for old man Bell. He died sudden, didn't he?" "Stew," someone whispered. "Put something in it." Laughter rolled through the room. Elias felt heat rise in his chest. The same heat that had ruined him once before. The urge to turn, to break someone's jaw, to silence them the only way he knew how. He crushed it. He paid. He left. The whispers followed him out like smoke. That night, the wolves came. Not a howl, not at first. It started with panic, chickens screaming, wood splintering, a deep animal snarl that cut through the dark. Elias was moving before he thought, rifle in hand, boots half pulled on. He ran across the frozen field toward the widow's cabin. Lantern light flickered on her porch. A gray shape tore into the chicken coop. Another circled in the dark, yellow eyes flashing. "Get inside!" Elias roared. The wolf turned at the sound. He dropped to one knee, aimed. The shot cracked through the night. One wolf fell. The other bolted into the trees. Silence returned, broken only by the widow's shaking breath. Feathers covered the ground like snow. He walked toward her slowly, rifle still raised. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. Her eyes met his. Not gratitude, not fear. Something deeper. A tired sadness that looked like it had no bottom. Elias knew that look. He saw it in his own mirror every morning. And for the first time since leaving Dodge City, he felt something shift inside his chest. He had come here to bury his past, but across that frozen field stood a woman who carried ghosts just like his, and the silence between them was no longer empty. The wolves were buried before dawn. The ground was frozen hard as iron. Elias swung the pickaxe until his arms shook, breaking the earth open inch by inch. The widow worked beside him with a shovel, her breath rising in white clouds, her movements steady and sharp. They did not speak. They buried the torn chickens first. Then Elias dragged the dead wolf into the shallow grave and rolled it in on top. By the time they covered the pit with dirt, a pale gray light was spreading across the horizon. The widow stood straight, her hands clasped in front of her. Her face was pale and still. "Thank you, Mr. Graves," she said. Her voice was flat, formal. He nodded. "Ma'am." She turned and walked back into her cabin without another word. Elias returned to his shack. He cleaned his rifle, sat on the edge of his cot, and stared at the wall. He had not come here to save anyone. He had come here to disappear. But the look in her eyes followed him into sleep. He dreamed of Dodge City, dust, gun smoke, his brother Jacob on the ground, blood soaking through his blue shirt, a drunk boy with a shaking hand and a smoking pistol, Elias drawing too late, then drawing again. And again, and again. He woke with his hand clawing at empty air. The shack was cold. His heart pounded like a hammer against bone. He sat up and breathed through it. The past would not stay buried. The next morning, he gathered scrap lumber and nails and walked to her fence. She was outside trying to fix the broken coop door with barbed wire. Her hands were bare and red from the cold. "That won't hold," he said. "It will," she answered without looking at him. "No, it won't. Not against a wolf." She yanked the wire tight. It slipped. A barb sliced deep into her palm. She hissed and pulled her hand to her chest. Elias crossed the distance before she could protest. "Give me your hand." "It's nothing. It's rust and dirt. It'll fester." She hesitated. He said her name for the first time. "Cora." It hung between them, heavier than the cold air. Slowly, she held out her hand. The cut was deep and ugly. He poured carbolic into it. She flinched, but did not pull away. He wrapped it tight with a clean strip of cloth. His hands were large and scarred. Steady. Careful. "I could have done it," she said. "I know," he answered. He rebuilt the coop that morning without asking again. The days that followed became something neither of them named. 2 white eggs appeared on his fence post the next morning. He left a dressed rabbit on her porch that evening. She mended a tear in his coat and folded it neatly on his rail. He split extra wood and stacked it by her door. They did not talk much, but they were aware of each other always. He knew when her chimney smoke meant she was baking instead of just keeping warm. She knew when he was pacing at night instead of sleeping. Winter deepened. Snow came hard and sideways, driven by a wind that screamed across the plains. The world shrank to the space between their 2 cabins. Then, one afternoon, he found a miner at her woodpile. The man had a burlap sack and desperate eyes. He was stuffing split logs inside it. "That's not yours," Elias said quietly. The miner spun, hand going to his knife. Elias moved faster. He grabbed the front of the man's coat and slammed him hard against the wall of the cabin. Snow shook loose from the roof. "Put it back," Elias said. His voice was low, dead calm. The miner saw something in his eyes and obeyed. When he fled toward town, Elias stood there, breathing hard. The cabin door opened. Cora stepped out, shotgun in her hands. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. "He was stealing your wood. And you thought I couldn't handle that?" Her eyes burned. "You think I haven't survived worse? You think this helps? He'll go back to town and say the widow's got a man now. You've painted a target on this house." He felt the truth of it hit his chest like a fist. "I was just trying. You were interfering." Her voice shook with anger and something else. "I don't need a man to fight my battles, especially not one who brings his ghosts with him." He said nothing. He turned and walked back to his shack. That night, neither of them slept. 3 days passed in silence. No shared eggs, no rabbit on the porch. Then the blizzard came. It was not a storm. It was a wall of white that erased the world. The wind tore at Elias's shack until the boards groaned. Snow piled against the door. The cold found every crack he had sealed. On the second night, the fire burned low. The ghosts came back with the wind. He was going to die alone in this frozen box. The thought of Cora just beyond the white hell broke something open inside him. He tied a rope to his door and to his waist. He stepped into the storm. It took an hour to cross a distance that normally took 3 minutes. He fell. He crawled. He lost direction and pulled himself back by the rope. When he finally slammed into her porch wall, he pounded on the door with numb fists. She opened it a crack. He fell forward into her cabin. Warmth hit him like a blow. "The cold," he muttered. "So much blood." She dragged him to the stove, stripped his frozen coat, forced coffee into his hands. "You're a fool," she said, but her voice was not unkind. He slept on her floor. In the firelight, she saw the scars on his shoulder, old bullet wounds, ugly and deep. She did not look away. In the middle of the night, she took her dead husband's heavy wool coat from a cedar chest and laid it over Elias. He sighed and settled. For the first time in years, neither of them faced the darkness alone. Morning came quiet. The storm had passed, but the world outside her cabin was buried under 10 feet of snow. Light came through the window, pale and clean, reflecting off white drifts that swallowed fences and paths alike. Elias woke on her floor. For a moment, he did not know where he was. The air was warm. It smelled of coffee and wood smoke. A heavy wool coat covered him. He sat up slowly. Every muscle screamed. His hands trembled from the cold he had dragged inside. He folded the coat carefully and set it on the chair. "I should go," he said, his voice rough. "You aren't going anywhere," Cora answered without turning. She stood at the stove, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. "Not until there's a path dug and food in your stomach." It was not a request. He sat. They drank in silence. Something had shifted. The distance between their cabins was gone, buried in snow. The days that followed were survival. They dug paths together, broke ice at the well, split wood until their hands bled. At night he stayed. It made sense. 1 fire instead of 2. 1 stove to feed. They did not speak about the storm or about the coat, but they began to share more than work. One afternoon, behind his shack, she found him kneeling over a small fire. He held something in tongs, a tarnished silver badge. He stared at it for a long time. Then he lowered it into the flames. The metal blackened, curled, melted. "It was from Dodge," he said quietly. "I wore it when my brother died." She did not interrupt. "I was supposed to protect people," he continued. "Instead, I killed a boy who didn't deserve it." He crushed the melted lump into the ashes with a stick. "It's heavy," he said. "Even when it's small." She stepped closer and held out a warm loaf of bread she had brought. "Some things are too heavy to carry alone," she said. Their fingers brushed. This time, neither of them pulled away. The kiss came days later. The lamp had burned low. The room was dim. Wind rattled the canvas over the window. "You're gentle," she said softly. He shook his head. "No." "You are," she insisted. "With wood. With my hand." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his as, "Then don't call me gentle unless you mean it," he murmured. She laced her fingers with his. When he kissed her, it was slow, careful, like a man walking toward something fragile. For a moment she leaned into him. Then she stiffened. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't belong to someone again." The word hung there. Belong. He stepped back. He understood. He walked out into the cold that night without another word. 3 days of silence followed. Then spring began to thaw the land. Elias rode into town for supplies. Sulphur Creek felt meaner after winter. The whispers were louder. In the store, a miner stepped close. "Enjoying the widow?" he sneered. "Heard she's good with stew." The man spat on Elias's boot. The room went silent. Elias looked down at the stain. He looked back up. "You're dripping," he said calmly. He paid for his coffee and left. He did not raise his fist. He did not draw his gun. When he returned and told Cora, She stared at him in disbelief. "You let him?" she asked. "It was just spit," he said. She had known men who would have broken bones over less. That night she came to his shack with Stu. And she told him the truth. About Silas. About the rope. The bruises. The way he controlled every dollar and told the town she was unstable so no one would believe her. "I prayed for him to die," she said. "But I never poisoned him." Elias listened. His jaw tightened. "You buried him," he said quietly. "That's justice enough." 2 weeks later, Trouble rode into town in a black suit. Arthur Bell, Silas's cousin. He filed a claim on her land and accused her of murder. The hearing drew the whole town. Miners testified that she never smiled, that she did not cry at the funeral. Arthur spoke of family honor. When asked to defend her, Elias stood. He told them he had been a deputy marshal in Dodge City. He told them he killed a boy who was no threat. He laid his own shame in front of them. "I am not a liar," he said, "and she did not kill her husband." Then Cora broke. She told them everything. About the rope, the bruises, the years of fear. She did not deny that she had wished Silas dead. "But I didn't do it," she said. "I just survived him." The judge dismissed the case. Arthur left, furious. Outside, someone threw a rock. Elias stepped in front of her and took it in the shoulder. They rode home in silence. That night she bandaged him with shaking hands. "Why would you stay?" she whispered. "They hate us." He cupped her face gently. "Because I would die," he said, "before I see you alone again." This time she did not pull away. Spring came true and warm. They planted corn and beans side by side. They rebuilt the coop stronger than before. One afternoon, he carved a wooden sign and nailed it above her door. Bell Graves. She looked at it for a long time. "We're not ghosts anymore," she said. He took her hand. "No," he answered softly. "We're home."